Review and Appeal Board meeting to order. It's our April 13th, 6 o'clock Zoom meeting. And at this time, I'd like to indicate that this is an appeal hearing and that as such, the appellant has requested that the meeting be open to the public. And so our meeting will be open for the public to view and listen. At this time, I'd like to have the roll call, please.
Sarah Buchanan.
Present.
Christopher Caldwell.
Shane Reed. Present.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Luis Garcia.
Here.
Curtis Gardner.
Here.
Daniel Hamilton.
Present.
Kim Hines Lepsey. Oliver Howell.
Here.
Barbara Miller.
Here.
Vernon Payne.
Here.
Jaquise Robertson.
Here.
Susan Stapleton.
Here.
Larry Talbert.
Present.
City staff present are Deputy City Manager Patsy Moore, myself, Patricia Vargas, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director Dorla Bonner. KDPS staff present are Chief Coakley, Assistant Chief Green, Executive Lieutenant Guilds, and Captain Diaz.
Thank you. I would like to note for the record that we do have a quorum present with our board, and that our next upcoming regular meetings will be held on May 11th and on June 8th. At this time, I would like to formally open the appeal hearing for PCR 2020-0034. And we will have Deputy City Manager Moore present the summary of the appeal.
Good evening, Chairman Payne, Vice Chairman Howell, and board members. This evening you have before you a hearing to hear the appeal of complaint number 2020-0034. The date of the incident was November 4th, 2020. The date of the complaint was November 5th, 2020. The complainant, Mr. Shane Reed, alleges 2 violations during an interaction with the Department of Public Safety. 1, racial profiling, and 2, lying. This complaint was investigated by the Office of Professional Standards, who recommended that the chief issue a disposition of exonerated. On February 10th, 2021, Chief Coakley did issue a finding of exonerated. On March 10th, 2021, Mr. Reed appealed the chief's findings with the city manager's office. The city manager is forwarding Mr. Reed's appeal to this board for a recommendation before he makes a final ruling on the appeal. Tonight, you will hear from the appellant and from the Office of Professional Standards. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my summary of the hearing before you this evening.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager Moore. At this time, I'd like to go through the process for the appeal. We will hear the appeal as indicated for PCR 2020-0034. Question: is there any member of the Citizens Public Safety Review and Appeals Board who is unable to render an unbiased opinion on this appeal due to a relational, financial, or other conflict of interest? This is the time to indicate that you will not participate in the discussion, questioning, or final meeting of the board to review the appeal. I do believe we had one person indicate that they might have a potential conflict of interest.
Yes, it would be me, Chairman Payne, Curtis Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner, and thank you for informing the board that there was the potential for a conflict and that you were not totally sure, but that you thought that there would be a conflict. So you may listen in on the proceedings. You, at this point, may not ask questions of either party. and you may not participate in the deliberations that will take place privately after this open public meeting. So thank you so much for that. We will hear from the appellant first and why they disagree with the chief's determination of the complaint. Next, we will hear, after hearing from the appellant, we will hear from the investigator, excuse me, to describe the investigation that was undertaken to inform the chief's findings. The appellant has requested that the hearing is open to the public. While the hearing is open to the public, we request that there be no outbursts of any kind from either the board or from the appellant or from our officers or city staff for that matter. While there may not be an opportunity for public comments during the hearing, all regular citizens' public safety review and appeal board meetings are open to the public and offer an opportunity for public comment on any topic. After hearing from the appellant and the investigator, the board will adjourn and go into closed deliberation. At the conclusion of our deliberations and within 15 days of the close of the hearing, the board will prepare a written report to be submitted to the city manager with a recommendation to sustain or amend the chief's findings in reference to Mr. Deshane's Reed's appeal. And importantly, the city manager shall have final authority to sustain or amend the chief's findings and will notify the appellant of his determination within 20 days following the appeal hearing. At this point in time, it's important to also note that Mr. Reed, thank you for bringing this matter before the board. Also, the appellant, Mr. Reed, you will not be permitted to ask questions of the officers presenting on for the city. And likewise, the city will not be afforded the opportunity to ask questions of you, Mr. Reed. You will simply present your case. Okay?
Yes, sir.
And at this point in time, and again, thank you so much, sir, for coming before the board. And at this time, we will hear the appellant, Mr. Reed's presentation.
Yes, sir. All right. I was dropping off a guy who cut my hair. He normally cut my hair. And when I was dropping him off, he got out the car. And when I went to look in my rearview mirror, to make sure before I actually get over into traffic, to put my blinker on and just watch for traffic, I noticed an officer that was coming from off Church Street. And I was already in between Rose Street and Burdick. So when I took it off, I put my blinker on and went down, and I was only going down to turn around. So when I turned around, he was already coming from off Church Street and headed towards Rose Street, and to come across Rose Street and head towards Burdick. And so by the time I turned around, and he was already coming towards me, but I was actually, in the driveway turning around, and he shot down to the corner, which was Burdick. And, by the time I made it up back, or, turned around and made it to Rose Street, he already had turned around once he passed Burdick to turn in a driveway. And after that, he shot up, kind of fast, like how they do when they just finna turn around on you, or, and try to pull you over, my guess, or whatever. And so when he did that, I felt like he was coming after me. So when he came up behind me, I turned right, and I already had my window down because I got my license. So I ain't got nothing to worry about. And I was trying to figure out what's going on because we can handle this right now. So I raised down my window, and when he turned right with me, I was already turning to the side with my window down, and I blew the horn, if that was a problem. I'm available, but he acted like he didn't see me. And then when he went past me, I put on my blinker to get back over into traffic. Now I was behind him. And as we headed towards Patterson Street, We both stopped at the light. He was in front of me. He kept going. I turned left. And then as I turned left and went down towards Westnich, like, because I was going to my property over by the Douglas Center. So as I'm going up Patterson Street, I headed to Westnich. And when I got up to Westnich, where Galilee Church is, it was another officer sitting over in the, well, he must have had just came around in that parking lot in Galilee, other parking lot that's across the street from Galilee Church, right when you pass Westnich going towards Douglas Center. But I turned left, and then when I turned left, I made another right there on William Street. But that officer that was on across the street in Galilee parking lot, he had came out the parking lot and shot up and went straight up Patterson towards Cobb Street. And then he turned left on Cobb Street, but I was coming up William Street. So when I was coming up William Street, all he did was just turn around and come up that way too. And when he came down that street where I was, and he came past me, and then he just made a U-turn and came right behind me. So I'm thinking, yeah, he was finna pull me over or something. But when he did that, I just felt like these two officers was working together, you know, and so when I turned right on Cobb Street, he came from, like I said, he turned around already from off William Street. And so he came up behind me, but it was another car in the back of me. And in my rearview mirror, I seen him go to the side, and then I thought he was hiding or something. But when he went to the side, he was only going to the side to move out the way. And then when he moved out the way, I seen the first officer who initially turned around on me back on Frank Street. He came up from off William Street. And then when he came from up off William Street, he turned right on Cobb Street. So now basically the second officer only moved out the way so that officer could come up and get me and come behind me now and pull me over instead of him pulling me over. And I felt like if I did anything wrong, you know, I felt like the second officer could have pulled me over too. Any one of them had a chance to hit their lights or do anything. And because they did all that, I just felt like they had no reason from the start, in which the other guy who it initially started with, he had no reason to, you know, pull me over. He said that my plate and everything came back with no insurance, but I know our car had insurance. Our insurance get paid automatically, you know, through our account, and, you know, where they take the money and then they already send your insurance to the Secretary of State and things like that. And then when they actually did pull me over after turning left onto Patterson, they pulled me over right where my property was, like a little bit across the street, right in front of the Douglas Center. And they also told me my license was suspended. The next day I went down there and talked to the guy that was down at the police station. And, you know, he took me through a bunch of stuff, saying it looks like in our system, it's showing that you don't have a license. So after talking to him, and he constantly saying, so you never been suspended and going through all that stuff. I said, look, sir, I'm not here for that. Can you please just tell me if my license are suspended? Yes or no? He took me through so much. And then after I said, well, I'll just be going to the Secretary of State next. And then I said, because basically you're saying I don't have a license, right? And he's saying, well, I'm not saying that. And then finally he ended up saying, well, yeah, you do have a license. So then that's when I told him I wanted to write a complaint, because the officer also told me that my license was suspended.
Okay. Anything further, Mr. Reed?
And I also have a video too, as well, you know, from where, you know, after I pulled over and I tried to blow my horn and tried to, you know, flag the officer down, because like I said, when he turned around on me, I thought it was an issue, but, you know, he didn't stop. And so right after that, that's when I started recording. And that's when I got the second officer and, you know, him coming around on me and them doing whatever they did.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Reed from any member of the board?
To our staff, are we playing a video for Mr. Reed?
Is this a part of Reach? Oh, we have a video from Mr. Reed as part of his presentation. Did not know that.
I'm sorry, Chairman Payne.
This is where I got behind him at, because, you know, like I said, I pulled over to the side, and when he didn't stop, he acted like he didn't see me. That's when I started going behind him. Now we on Patterson Street right there. And you can see he kept straight. And then I turned left. And now I'm going up towards Park Street on down by Westnedge. And it looked like I can see the officer car right there where my mouth's at, where he just turning into the second one, if that was him. But once we headed up towards Park Street right now. This is not my first time being done like this, so that's why normally I just record. And it's not my first complaint that I had to write on officers where they tried to, do these things. I even had to call the police one time back in the past when I was young, where officer followed me for like 15, 20 minutes. I had to call 911 and say, hey, this officer is constantly following me, like, and he been following me for 15 minutes. And they had to call that officer just for him to get off me. But here's the officer right here. His car is in his parking lot across the street from, see, turning around right here where my mouth is at. He's over here. See him right there? So he's in that parking lot. That's Galilee property. And then he's coming out. There you go. And he went up that way. Then I turned right on this street, which was William Street. And I'm headed down here. And then he's gonna come up this street. Because he's turning left from off Patterson and then turn left down this street where I'm at. There you go, right there. So now he just turned left on the street where I was on, and he's basically turning around while I'm heading to the stop sign. So now I just turned right, going towards Patterson. I just felt like if I was wrong or something, when people go on a high-speed chase or anything, I mean, if you do something wrong, all officers got the right to pull you over. And so once it goes back to, it's going to show in the rearview mirror, other driver, side door window mirror. Okay, there you go. Okay, there you go, right there. That's the one that just turned around. You see going to the side. And also you'll see the other officer. There go the first officer coming back now. the one in that mirror is the one that's high. Well, the one that moved over to the side for the one where it initially started to get me. So I think that was about it right there. And then, you know, down the line, that's where they pull me over and tell me my insurance, my car didn't have no insurance on it. And then, you know, after I gave him my license, he told me, he brought it back and said my license was suspended. In which I understand because, you know, I already had been up to the Secretary of State, you know, putting the car in my name, and, you know, also around that time, and, not recently and stuff too, I've been helping people actually get into the Secretary of State because they had a hard time getting in. So I think that's it.
Are we finished with this particular video?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reed. Is it coming down or?
You stop sharing your screen at this moment.
Great. I'm trying to figure out how do I get rid of it.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Again, do we have any other information coming from Mr. Reed?
See, I do have just a talk with the guy down at the police station about my license, you know, where he tried to, you know, where we talked about, you know, whether my license was suspended or not. But I mean, I'm just pretty much tell you that's what, you know, happened, where I was just down there and he, you know, just kept on taking me around the corner. He told me in his system, my license showing suspended and things like that. Then he goes and tell me, you know, he was just saying, let me check the Secretary of State. And then he going through papers and stuff like that, where, you know, he's just taking me around the corner and I'm just asking him, sir, can you please just tell me if my license suspended, yes or no? He constantly asking me, have I ever been suspended, things like that. And then that's when, you know, at the end, he, you know, he finally tell me after I say, so you telling me my license are suspended, right? Well, I'm not, no, well, it looks like you do have a license. And I'm just like, okay, you know. So then when he said that, I said, well, why your officer lied to me then? He said, I don't know. So I said, all right, I would like to write a complaint.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Tolbert.
Yes, when you're saying that it's not your driver's license that was suspended, it's your insurance on the car. Is that correct?
They told me both. They told me I didn't have insurance on my car, and they told me my license was suspended.
But your license was on you and you have a date on your license, correct?
Yes, sir. And then, you know, like
And
I said,
that date on the license said that you were actually up to date, correct?
yes, sir. I believe my license don't suspend until like 24.
Okay.
Year 24.
Other questions? Mr. Reed, let me reiterate and repeat how important your coming forward is to this board. We are very much aware of the 2013 Lambert traffic stop study, which indicated in our community that we did have racial profiling going on. So this is important for citizens to understand that we welcome the opportunity to look into these kinds of issues. So I'm not giving you platitudes. I'm giving you a genuine thank you for coming forward. That's not to indicate that after this hearing, we can predict what the outcome is going to be. But
Yes,
I want to indicate to you the sincerity that we feel when citizens come forward. Now, I do have a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did the officers at any time talk to you about any moving traffic violations? Speeding, improper U-turns, having your rearview mirror covered, having your license plate blocked,
No, sir.
anything of that nature that dealt with a moving traffic violation. No officer spoke to you about that whatsoever or indicated to you that that was a reason for them to stop you. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, you're correct. They didn't talk to me about any of that.
Okay. And then when you made the U-turn at, was it 130 Patterson? You made a legal U-turn there after you dropped off the barber, your buddy. Is that correct?
No, I didn't make a, oh, yeah, I turned into a driveway. So yeah, that was legal.
You turned into a driveway,
Yes,
which
sir.
is legal.
Yes, sir.
And then you backed out and you continued. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So you didn't violate any traffic laws when you made that turn,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, sir.
After you made that turn, a police car came behind you after it had made a U-turn to follow you. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it closed on you at a high rate of speed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you pulled over and indicated without any other interaction with the police officer that you wanted to stop and see if there was a problem because that officer came up on you at a high rate of speed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And after that, you engaged in a series of turns and encountered another police car that was, in your opinion, following you. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, and you've had this experience before.
Yes, sir.
So, question for you:
Yes, sir.
were you trying to evade the police, or were you concerned about being followed by the police?
I was concerned, their behavior, how they were, and being followed and, and what they was trying to do to me, because this is what they do. And, I done been, where they try to just pick with you for no reason and do these things.
And so if your driving was anything, it was to help to end your being, in your opinion, profiled and followed by the police, and not necessarily to evade the police, but being uncomfortable because you're being followed. Am I correct in that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Give me a second here, Mr. Reed. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
And Chair Payne, just reminder, we are asking just questions for clarification at this point.
Exactly. And what I'm trying to do is address the fact that in the police report, it indicated that he was evading the police. And I want to get clarity on the fact that from his perspective, he was not evading the police. He was being followed by the police, which made him very uncomfortable. So I think that's within the confines of what's contained in the police report. If not, I apologize. Okay. 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 The other was it established that you did not, that car had no insurance on it? Was that established?
That's what That's what they told me once they pulled me over. He said that was the reason. He said the car came back with no insurance.
Right. Okay. One final question, I hope.
And I actually give me a ticket for the proof of no insurance. I said, give me the ticket because I wanted to, address this issue because I know this car got insurance. And then he kept on saying, oh no, that's all right. Just give me your license or just give me your ID and stuff like that. And, things like that. But I asked him for the ticket. He wouldn't give it to me. I said, no, give me the ticket.
Right. Thank you for that. Now, can you received a letter from the city manager's office informing you of the disposition of your complaint, correct?
Yes.
Could you summarize the content of that letter for the board?
I don't have it actually like right on
What
me.
essentially, what did it say? Was it a long letter? Was it a paragraph? Essentially, what
It
did it say?
wasn't very much because I actually had to call when I talked to Patricia, she had to explain what, the words meant because, I wasn't familiar with like understanding the words, but it was very short. It really didn't say too much, and, I didn't understand the words because I didn't know what it meant.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. We appreciate your coming forward and providing us with that information. I think at this point in time, we'll hear from our Office of Professional Standards.
Mr. Payne, may I ask a quick question? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Before
Absolutely.
we move on.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you. I just wanted to, for clarification, Mr. Reed, your driver's license, since this incident happened until now, I would say, there has been no changes to your driver's license, like nothing's been, with the Secretary of State or,
No, sir.
anything like that at all. Okay, thank you.
I just had one quick question too. So I know you just mentioned to Chairman Payne's line of questioning that the officer who pulled you over stated that one of the reasons he pulled you over was because there wasn't insurance on the vehicle. But I just wanted to ask you straight out, was there insurance on the vehicle, or do you admit that there was not insurance on the vehicle?
There was insurance on the vehicle. There was insurance on the vehicle. Like I say, our insurance, we automatically, like money come out of our account, it goes, to the insurance people. They even send it in the mail. So we get it before, our insurance even in. That's just the way it works. Like when you go through the insurance company and where they takes the money out of your account and, do all of that stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board before we move on to the Office of Professional Standards? Okay, let's hear from our Office of Professional Standards and their answers to the appeal.
Thank you, Chairman Payne, members of the board, Deputy City Manager Patsy Moore, and Chief Vernon Copley. My name is Rafael Diaz. I am a captain assigned to the Office of Professional Standards. Here with me is Assistant Chief Green and Inspector Giles. I was assigned to investigate the complaint made by Mr. Reed. The complaint concerned a traffic stop made on November 4th, 2020 at about 4:30 p.m. and lasted approximately 6 minutes and 30 seconds. The complaint consisted of two parts. First, Mr. Reed alleged that he was racially profiled when stopped without probable cause. And second, Mr. Reed alleged that he was lied to about his license status. My investigation included interviews of Mr. Reed, the officers involved, and a review of all documents and videos generated from the traffic stop. Now I will present to the board important information about the case. To frame this presentation, I will follow a roadmap of sorts to keep my thoughts in a logical format. This presentation has 6 parts. Part 1, the purpose behind traffic enforcement. Part 2, The authority to make a traffic stop based on Secretary of State information. Part 3, the roles played by the primary and secondary officer during a traffic stop. Part 4, officer priorities in providing services. Part 5, a review of 2 videos from the traffic stop in question. And Part 6, the recommendations drawn from the investigation. Part 1, the purpose behind traffic enforcement can be found in KDPS policy 400, which details in broad strokes the general duties that public safety officers are to perform. And in KDPS policy 500, the specific purpose regarding traffic, where the specific purpose of traffic enforcement is found. That purpose is to improve public safety through education and enforcement of traffic-related laws. When enforcement action is needed, officers should take into consideration the short-term and the long-term goals of traffic enforcement, which are to deter the potential violator and gain voluntary compliance with the law. Under KDPS policy 401, bias-based policing is prohibited. Officers are to provide law enforcement services and to enforce the law equally, fairly, objectively, and without discrimination toward an individual or group. Part number 2, the authority to make a traffic stop based on Secretary of State information is found in Michigan compiled law 500.3101. That law makes operating a vehicle without insurance a 1-year misdemeanor. Insurance companies are required to send insurance information to the Secretary of State on the 1st and 15th of each month. Secretary of State posts this information to the Law Enforcement Information Network, commonly referred to as LEAN. An officer accesses this record by running a license plate using the computer in the patrol vehicle. Running a license plate takes only a few moments to enter the information, and a response is nearly instantaneous. The response tells you who owns the car, whether the registration is valid or expired, and the insurance status, among other information. The insurance response, termed an electronic insurance verification, or EIV, is clearly marked with either a Y for yes or an N for no. In People v. Massey, the Michigan Court of Appeals found that a traffic stop made based on Law Enforcement Information Network, the EIV response, is reasonable. The Massey case was published and is binding in Michigan. MCL 257.225 requires that a license plate be attached where it can be seen. An officer may run any license plate that they can see. In Kansas v. Glover, decided on April 6th of 2020, the United States Supreme Court held that an officer's traffic stop based on a license plate was justified. In Glover, the officer ran a plate without any indication of wrongdoing. This decision has reaffirmed other past decisions. Part number 3, the roles played by the primary and secondary officer during a traffic stop are different. The primary officer generally makes contact with the driver, discusses the reason for the stop, and requests a driver's license, insurance, and registration paperwork. The secondary officer is there to ensure the safety of the scene. By splitting these responsibilities, each officer can maintain focus and expedite the process. Part number 4, officer priorities in providing services change from moment to moment based on the totality of the circumstances. Officers must constantly evaluate the situation and determine whether they should continue with the task or change course. Life safety is paramount within that decision-making process. The factors involved in any decision can be many, but generally relate to the nature of the contact and available units. Now let's watch 2 videos. First, we will watch Officer Yeager's body camera. I am going to let the video play through from start to finish. However, I may pause it briefly now and again. Because the system is being played through the cloud, sometimes a buffering issue occurs. By stopping the video periodically, we can allow it to catch up. Now I want you to watch carefully and look for 4 things. First, notice how many patrol cars pass by with lights and sirens. Second, listen for the explanation given by Officer Yeager for the stop. Third, while Officer Yeager is checking information on the computer, listen for the word suspended. And fourth, listen to what Officer Yeager tells Officer Morgan about Mr. Reed's license status. If you would just give me a moment to get that video. Is that the right one? Are you able to see the screen? Outstanding.
Well, man, I just told you because you don't have insurance on the vehicle. How do you figure that? When you were on the plane for showing me. Yeah, I don't know if you because the COVID stuff or what, but you just got your license and registration.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. Yeah, but what made you like? Where did you even like? Where did you run my pen?
No, I was behind you.
Where was you behind?
A little earlier.
A little earlier.
Yeah.
Was you the same when I was over on Frenchman? Yeah, because when I pulled off from over Frenchman, I turned left into that driveway and you shot down. And then you shot down and you get that corner, I turned right, and you turned behind. You did all that, but nothing was not even the case. So you say you had to be behind. You got behind me to be attacked and you bothered me for no reason. You see me probably right there.
Well, we could be done with this. You just got your license and registration.
But the thing is that you did all that and then you did all that. That's why I recorded it and that's why I did all that because I get bothered out for this and stuff. So I gotta protect myself. And I see with everything that you did. That's why I recorded. I see you was part of that. I see what y'all did.
Regardless, you don't have insurance on the vehicle.
Okay.
That's the reason.
We'll get it figured out.
Okay.
Now I'm bucking my seat out.
For sure.
All right, thank you. So what? All right. So what do you need first?
Just your license and if you have registration or. You guys like?
Yeah.
That's all I really need.
Yeah, matter of fact, just give me that and then the ticket for that no improvement insurance.
I didn't say you were getting a ticket.
No, I want the whatever you gotta give me, just give me that, cause then I go, cause my girl, I know she got insurance on this or whatever. Then I'm gonna take that to the Secretary of State, wherever we gotta take it to the court people or whatever, to the police station. No, just give me what you gotta give me. You say you pulled me over for that, just give me that. Show me where that.
I didn't even say you were getting a ticket, man.
But I want
You just got your license. That's all I need.
Asking me for my license, so now that makes me feel like.
I I got other stuff going on. I'd like to get you out of here as soon as possible. Or just tell me your name. You don't even get to me.
It don't matter, man, because you just killed me for nothing, bro. Like, that's what I'm saying. That's why, bro, this ain't my first rodeo, man. This ain't my first time, man. I gotta give you
I'm
all.
trying to get his name.
All right, bro, I'm gonna give it to you, bro. I'm not saying I'm not
All
gonna,
I need is your license, man.
I'm gonna give it.
I gotta go to this other call, so
Okay,
I'll
I
get
got you.
kicked out of
You
here.
just did all that, bro. But I just want to take, you said you put me over for no proof.
That's all I need.
But you said you just want my license. So it makes me feel like you just wanted my ID. You just wanted to know who I was, man. You just wanted to bother me. That's what I'm trying to get you. Because I seen you down there and you picked with me for no reason.
Okay.
Because I
Can I
seen
see
you.
your ID? I'll have you out here as soon as
Thank you,
possible.
sir.
I'll be right back.
Three status. Six two standby 153 status.
We're 14.
Clear 6-2, go ahead. Cancel this. We're gonna miss. What was your last? I'm sorry. You can cancel like you can right at more less. All right, thank you. Clear it. On your radio is garbled.
Yeah, just suspended, revoked. Yeah. I'm not gonna give you a ticket. You know your license is suspended. Okay. I don't know either, but try to get that taken care of. I know with COVID stuff, it's hard to get in the text.
Be up and let them know. Perfect. That's my plan. I'm gonna keep you up. If you look on my Facebook page, that's what I've been doing, getting people in there. That's what I'm out here doing. Okay. I'm trying to do something good because it's always they already trying to make it so just
okay.
Make me look bad.
You have a good day, sir.
Let's recap for a moment to see if you caught everything that occurred. I have had the benefit of watching the video many times to be able to catch these details. First, there were 4 patrol vehicles that passed the traffic stop. They were running with lights and sirens. Or 5 if you count PSO Morgan, who cleared the traffic stop and ran with lights and sirens also. Second, when Officer Yeager first contacted Mr. Reed, he said, "I just pulled you over because you don't have insurance on the vehicle." Third, when Officer Yeager is checking the computer, did you catch the word suspended? Fourth, Officer Yeager told Officer Morgan that Mr. Reed was just suspended and revoked. Now we are going to watch the dash camera video. In this video, you will hear dispatch giving information that you could not hear in the first video. Officer Yeager has an earpiece that channels the radio traffic directly into his ear. This helps the officer to hear dispatch information even while communicating with other people. I am going to start the video a few moments before Officer Yeager activates his emergency lights. Let's begin. Secondary.
Am I the only one that lost audio?
I still have audio.
I still have audio.
Mr.
I
Carter.
also have audio.
Okay.
Your headphones may have gone dead.
Well, mine are plugged into my machine, so they're not battery powered.
Well, it seems like you can hear us,
I can.
so you're probably good. Not the officer, Captain Diaz isn't saying anything right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My apologies, it took me just a moment to get the video set. I'm going to go ahead and start, and just remember, I'll stop it periodically and we'll talk. We should have sound. My apologies, I'm gonna have to start it back up a second. I think when I jumped, it has a little bit of a glitch, so pardon me just one moment. I need to go back to 455.
Board number 1004, target 310. Going to be for a 6-year-old female with a history of heart problems. She is passed out and when she is breathing, she does have stuff coming out of her nose. She is not currently awake. Likely to the 911 dispatch there at 16:30. Yeager, T400 is right there, starting CPR.
So at this point, if everybody was able to hear, there was dispatch information that they were starting CPR. And that's a call that is occurring just a couple of blocks away at Northwind's Apartments. Now that is a call that would require an initial response of a rescue and life paramedics, but once they get there and realize that there is an additional need because CPR is going to start, then that's going to start to draw additional officers from the area. And that is a heightened response because it is a life safety issue. And so in the next moment, you're going to hear a command officer ask whether other officers are en route to that call as another prompt, making sure that we do have an appropriate response. Officer Morgan is aware of this dispatch, knows that that's his area, is going to go back to his car and check the dispatch because he realizes that this traffic stop for no insurance is now becoming less important as other stakes are rising.
Please, cents. 32 standby, 153 status. There's 62 bud. Get the alert. I'm sorry. All right, that's it for.
Check on your radio is from.
In the next moment, Officer Yeager is going to ask, Officer Morgan is going to ask Officer Yeager whether he has anything in a routine lane check. You're going to hear Officer Yeager respond that he's clear, but he's just suspended and revoked. So at that time, that statement indicates that that's what he believed based on the records that he had been reviewing.
Yeah.
In the next moment, you're going to hear radio traffic from Officer Morgan, who just left and is driving west on Patterson. He's going to pass two individuals who carry rifles that are slung from slings close to their body. They are walking east towards the traffic stop. We don't know who they are. They're just in the area openly carrying these firearms. And Officer Morgan, knowing that that would be an officer safety issue, relays that to Officer Yeager. Now, if you notice Officer Yeager's head, he's looking to the left, he's looking to the west. And in a moment when he pulls away, you're going to be able to see these two individuals that are walking towards him. So not only has he been told about it, but he also sees these two individuals coming towards him with long rifles. Now what's coming across is dispatch information for a fire that is also on Douglas that needs a response. So Officer Yeager has all of these things going on, and now he needs to shift his attention away from this misdemeanor offense of no insurance to other life safety considerations.
Station Squad 16, microphone for structure fire station 702, 702 Douglas.
If you look on the sidewalk, there are two men approaching. This gentleman here has a rifle slung down here at his waist, and this gentleman has it slung and is on his left side. In closing, Mr. Reed alleged that he was racially profiled by being stopped without probable cause. However, there is no evidence to support this contention. To the contrary, the investigation confirmed several facts demonstrating that the stop was justified. I personally confirmed that the lean response, the law enforcement information network response, showed that the vehicle being driven by Mr. Reed was not insured. Mr. Reed did not own the vehicle. Mr. Reed never produced proof of insurance during the traffic stop. Officer Yeager told Officer Morgan that the vehicle was not insured before the traffic stop. Officer Yeager told Mr. Reed that he was stopped for no insurance during those first few moments of the contact. Therefore, the Office of Professional Standards recommended that Officer Yeager and Officer Morgan be exonerated as to this allegation. Mr. Reed alleged that he was lied to when told that his license was suspended. I confirm that Mr. Reed was not suspended at the time of the stop. Officer Yeager was ultimately incorrect when he told Mr. Reed that he was. However, this error appears to be an honest mistake. It was not malicious. Officer Yeager was faced with rapidly developing events that warranted his attention and divided his attention from the immediate task. The traffic stop at hand for a misdemeanor violation of operating without insurance was no longer a priority. The cardiac arrest, armed subjects approaching his position, and then a fire dictated that he should clear the stop quickly and move on to other duties. The computer gave an audible response of suspended. The computer scans the law enforcement information network response that includes the Secretary of State information records for certain keywords, including suspended and wanted. Because Mr. Reed had been suspended in the past, the computer caught the word suspended and notified Officer Yeager. When Officer Yeager told Officer Morgan that Mr. Reed's license was suspended, that expression was evidence of his honest belief at that time based on his review of the information. A typical lien response may have 7 to 10 or more pages of information that the officer must read, decipher, and decide. Officer Yeager did not take any enforcement action. Instead, he recommended that Mr. Reed check on his insurance and license status. Policy does not require officers to be perfect. The error was honestly made and did not violate any policy. Therefore, the Office of Professional Standards recommended that Officer Yeager be exonerated as to this allegation. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Captain Diaz. Appreciate that. Appreciate the effort that you put in interviewing both the appellant and the officers involved and providing that in-depth report. We don't take that for granted, and we certainly appreciate it. At this time, are there any questions that the board might have for Captain Diaz? Mr. Tolbert.
Just a couple of questions. On your SIP-SCRAP appeal of the first page where complaint information, what is the date of the letter? It says 2/24/2020. Shouldn't that be 2/24/2021? Because the incident didn't happen until 11/4/2020, correct?
I'm trying to find the spot, and you said page 1, sir?
Yes, 1 of 3 in the submission date, appeal, SIP-SCRAP appeal.
Yeah, I think you're correct, Mr. Talbot.
Okay, and now when you ask someone for their license and they give you their license and there's a date, expiration date of 2024 on it, can that license still be suspended?
Yes, sir, and that is a great question. The date on the license refers to the date of expiration, and all licenses will expire after a period of time requiring a renewal. A suspension occurs outside of that process when someone either fails to pay a citation, and there's lots of other activities that can trigger a suspension. That suspension, even if the person had their license, wouldn't necessarily get at that license to affect its status. So just because it's currently not expired doesn't mean that it wouldn't necessarily be not suspended.
Okay. But in the system, when it came back, it said suspended. That was just an error for the Secretary of State system.
No, sir, that was an automated response by the computer. So when those 7 to 10 pages of information pop up and the officer is reading through that information, looking for information about the driver's status, whether they're suspended or expired, driving history, whether there are any wants or warrants, all of that information that comes up, the computer will scan those documents and look for key phrases, one of which is the word suspended. So it's trying to make sure that the officer doesn't miss information. So if it sees that word, it verbalizes it, gives it an audible tone, and then that's an indication to the officer that they need to look a little bit more closely at the record before them as they work through that. And as that was occurring, there were other events that unfortunately distracted him, and he made the error.
Okay, so it said suspended, but if he would have read further down, it would have said it was not suspended.
Correct. If he had been able to take more time to do that, yes, he would have been able to see that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. Any other questions, please? Yes, sir, Mr. Garcia. You're muted.
Yep. Okay. Hi. I just wanted to ask. So the start of the stop basically was triggered by the system saying that Mr. Reed's vehicle was not insured. Is that correct? And they understand that part right?
No, the activation of the lights triggered the camera. And so that's the initiation of the traffic stop.
Yes, but my understanding is that what triggered the stop or what triggered the probable cause was the lack of insurance in the vehicle. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Right. And just out of for clarification purposes, really more than anything. So if the officer Yeager would have run that number plate and it would have come back with valid insurance, obviously it's very difficult to speak retroactively. But for example, if that was the case, what would be the outcome today of that stop? Would have happened at all?
If I had not been able to verify that the car was in fact listed that way in SOS, Secretary of State, then yes, there would be a real problem here, yes. Because there wouldn't have been probable cause for the traffic stop.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Other questions, please? Captain Diaz, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you referred to the two gentlemen open carrying as armed suspects. Is that correct?
I don't remember using that word. They are armed citizens or armed individuals. I didn't think that they were suspects in anything.
Well, I think if you go back and check, you referred to them as armed suspects, which brings me to another question for you, sir. Is open carry a designated safety issue in our community?
So open carry is a very difficult topic, right? So open carry is the absence of a law that prohibits it. So people can carry pistols and long rifles openly, not concealed, because the CCW laws affect carrying concealed weapons. So is it a crime? No, it's lawful. Is it something that an officer should be aware of when there are people who they do not know that have guns in the area? Certainly, it's a factor. And so for that officer to remain in an area when people are approaching him, they weren't signaling to him. But it's one of those things that the difference between a firearm that's carried at a low ready or slung as they were with the barrel pointed down and pointed up, these are crazy times. I wouldn't have wanted to stay there any longer than I had to. And Officer Yeager certainly wasn't comfortable having them approach him. So he figured, you know what, I'm just going to leave the area. There's a house fire. There is a CPR event going on. And Mr. Reed assured me that the vehicle was insured. So he left it as it was, an educational moment, and cleared the scene quickly.
Well, I want to be very clear about how you characterize that situation, because what we had were two Michigan citizens exercising their rights to open carry, and you characterize them as a safety issue. And I just want to be sure that we're using that characterization throughout our community. And it's not a limited characterization, but anytime your officers, I would assume, see someone open carry, I'm assuming, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that you refer to that as a safety issue.
We tend to look at all sorts of things as safety issues. Some are small, some are big. The presence of firearms is something that we're mindful of. But I believe that might be a little bit outside the scope of what I prepared to talk about here.
I raised the issue because it's an important issue, because if officers are approaching citizens with that heightened sense of safety and security for themselves in a traffic stop situation, the consequences of a simple ticket may evolve into something else if they have a heightened sense of what it is they must do. But I want to move on. I don't want to stay there. But do you understand my concern?
Again, I'm not prepared to comment on that, really.
Okay. Let's go back to the original complaint that the citizen filed, and it was over profiling and lying. the stop was not, the initial reason for the stop was not not having an insured vehicle. Why was Mr. Reed's vehicle involved in a lien search?
Officer Yeager ran the plate of the vehicle that was in front of him.
Just a second, sir. I don't mean to cut you off, but before he ran the plate, what happened to trigger the need to run the plate?
There was nothing to trigger it. The vehicle was in front of him, and officers in Michigan may run the license plate of any vehicle. It is in the open area. The officer was in a place where he was lawfully permitted to be. A vehicle was in front of him, and he ran a license plate. This is a routine practice that occurs on a regular basis. In fact, that's why they affix license plates to the rear of vehicles, so that we can readily identify and share that information.
Officer Diaz, let me take you back to the investigation. The investigation indicated that Officer Yeager, in fact, did a U-turn and came around and followed Mr. Reed, because he had pulled into the driveway at 130 Patterson and came out and went away. And he interpreted that as being evasive. And so he immediately turned around. That was the beginning of this whole series of events. Is that correct, sir?
My understanding that is, as Officer Yeager passed the vehicle, which was turning into the driveway, that he ran the license plate. As he got to the next intersection and Mr. Reed is going the opposite direction, he sees that the vehicle is uninsured. So coupling that with his movement, he turned to follow the vehicle.
Yes, what I'm trying to ascertain is the concern for profiling and how we got to the issuance of the ticket, or not issuance of the ticket, but the stop. And from what I understand in the report, it was because Mr. Reed's was deemed to have turned at a place that had high drug activity and other activity going on over the past year. That was one. Two, the department deemed his behavior driving as erratic and unusual. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question? What part would you like me?
PSO Morgan explains that Mr. Reed is acting weird and describes the unusual driving pattern. PSO Morgan says that it looks like he is trying to avoid police contact. All of this is occurring prior to him being given a ticket, or not given a ticket, but stopped. And I think we have to go back and look at those issues before we get into the emergency situation, because we're dealing with a profiling question. Do you not agree with that?
So the running of the license plate occurred as he was behind the vehicle, before and as it was turning into the driveway. That whole process only takes a few moments. You enter a plate, you hit send. Almost instantaneously, you get that information back. As he gets to the next intersection, and Mr. Reed is now backing out and going the other direction, he sees that the vehicle has no insurance. Yes, Officer Yeager was also aware of the area that he was in. That address has had many, many complaints over the last year, some of which are included in this report. So the running of the plate, the positive indication that it lacks insurance, the location, all of that, all of those things Officer Yeager is aware of. And we can't look at any one of those in isolation. That would ask an officer to look at only one thing and put his blinders on to everything else. And it is on the officer to make sure he knows where he's at, where the problems in his community are, and then to act on those. And so when he sees that response, now the vehicle's going in the other way, he's going to look to take enforcement action.
PSO Yeager decided that conducting a traffic stop when when the vehicle was stopped was not safe. And so what led him to deem that stop not to be safe?
So this is where we get into looking at this from two different perspectives. Mr. Reed detailed how he felt in being followed and how that made him uncomfortable because of what the officer did. Turned and followed him. Officer Yeager, being in that area, knowing that the driveway that he had turned onto was a resident that had some, and I'm referring to page 3, had some 97 calls for service in the last calendar year, 28 of which had resulted in written reports, including crimes of domestic assault, felonious assault, heroin overdoses, and a homicide as recently as October 6, 2020. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who passes by that residence is somehow involved in that activity, but it is the officer's job to investigate and to look, and he had positive information that that vehicle was not insured. So when he turned and followed that vehicle and now traveling northbound on roads, he pulled over to the side of the road. From Officer Yeager's perspective, he now had a couple of different movements that he has to wonder, is he doing this because of my presence? And so we have two different interests, right? Mr. Reed is looking at it through his lens and how he feels, and Officer Yeager, a trained investigator, who's in an area doing his job, looking at vehicles, seeing the comings and goings of individuals, was acting on his.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Jeremy.
But I have another question for you.
Yes, sir.
You quoted the MCL 257.328 statute.
Jeremy, can you help me with what page you're on?
10.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You have it?
I do.
And you also then refer to KDPS policy 41.1.1. You see that? Which is right below in the next.
Yes.
You see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so on the one hand, a police officer has the right to run a plate for any reason, no reason at all.
Yes, sir.
Right? Correct? You agree with that?
That's correct.
And then on the other hand, our policies state that a police officer cannot run a plate to racial profile. Correct?
Correct.
How do you determine whether a police officer is abusing MLC 257.328 and actually practicing profiling?
Much like the process that we're involved in here today. A citizen is concerned, we look into it, we examine all the information. There was a reason given for that traffic stop. We examined whether that was actually a factual basis for it. In this investigation, we found that. We found other indicia indicating that at that moment, that was his frame of mind. That's what he thought. That's what he was acting on. And that it appeared to be acting in good faith. And absent other factors, none of which I could find in my investigation or my interviews, beyond Mr. Reed's feeling that the way that he was stopped made him uncomfortable.
So am I correct in saying that our Department of Public Safety has no assessment tools that they use to differentiate between those two things?
Sir, I believe that's beyond the scope of what I have prepared for today.
Well, you provided this information and data in front of me, and you drew the comparison in terms of supporting the decision that was being made relative to Mr. Reed. So I'm simply asking you questions about the information that you presented, and asking you, rather than having a board meeting, does the police department have a way to assess the effectiveness of these two concerns, or my concerns? Or as you pointed out, the only way to do that is through a board meeting. Am I correct in that?
At this time, I'm not prepared to comment on that. That's outside the scope of what it was that I have prepared.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Any other board questions? Mr. Talbert.
So initially, he was in a area that you deemed to be, that had a lot of calls in the past, correct?
Yes, there's one house in that area in particular.
And so that was one of the reasons that the officer may have followed him.
No, sir, he was passing the car, running the plate. As he passed the car, he gets the lean response. Mr. Reed goes the other way. When he has the lean response, he's able to see that the vehicle is uninsured. That therefore is probable cause to conduct a traffic stop. He turns to follow him. He is also simultaneously aware of these other events, all of which are in his consideration.
So if that insurance would have come up, that he had insurance on the car, he would not have been stopped.
Correct. And if he had stopped him, that would have been an issue because there would not have been probable cause.
Thank you, Ms. Colbert.
Question.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So in the stop, there were two officers. I think there was Officer Morgan, who was on the, was it like right-hand side, or at least my right-hand side, looking in the car? Is that like a common practice?
It is. And so there are two different activities that occur. You have a primary officer who contacts the driver. You have a secondary officer who is there to ensure safety. If you notice, there was a little bit of tint on the windows, so it made it just maybe a little bit more difficult to see with the sun on the other side. You can see at one point he takes his glasses off and tucks them into his shirt, and so he looks. Doesn't see anything, posts at the driver's door, and at one point when Officer Yeager comes back, he simply stays there and waits, and that is what a cover officer does. The primary officer will make contact, conduct the investigation, gather the information, decide whether they'll write a ticket or not. And then the other officer just hangs out. If everything's cool, they leave. If things get a little bit escalated or there's some other issue, then they're there to assist.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Any other questions from the board for Captain Diaz? Yes, Ms. Stapleton.
You had indicated that it's fairly common and routine to run license plates by the police. And so what does that really mean, fairly common? Is this something that happens every day by individuals who are out on patrol? Is it something that happens occasionally? What does the "it happens fairly often" mean?
It should be occurring on a regular basis every day by officers in patrol. It is one of the ways that they can find information out about drivers who are wanted, drivers who are suspended, vehicles that are not properly tagged, and any other kind of violation that would come up from that process. I can tell you that myself, while in patrol, would run dozens of plates during the day. Most instances, there's never anything that comes of it. The driver appears, or the registered owner would be valid. The vehicle would show that it's insured, and it would not be expired. And so as we're making our way through the city, that's just one way that we can check to see that everyone is operating the vehicle as they ought to. In those instances when they're not, we would stop a driver, ask them about it. Has your plate been expired? Sometimes folks might say, oh, you know what, I forgot, or more recently, COVID, I can't get in. And then an officer will weigh whether we can have a conversation and it will address the issue, or maybe a citation is warranted. And that's the constant kind of ebb and flow of traffic enforcement as it goes on. Now, if there's lots of calls for service, an officer might not have an opportunity during the day to run many plates at all. It all depends on that workflow. A few less calls means a little bit more traffic enforcement, a few more calls, a little less traffic enforcement. But we try to balance those activities out. And certainly traffic enforcement is something that we need to focus on.
Thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
I have
Any-
one more question, Chairman Payne.
Yes, sir, Mr. Tolbert, please.
Yeah, we found that his license was valid. Did you do a follow-up on his insurance to see whether that was valid or not?
When I first got the complaint, the first thing that I did was run the lien SOS check because I wanted to see what the printout would say. The printout itself, which I cannot share because it's Secretary of State protected information, so I can't give you a copy of that. It's prohibited. But I ran it, I personally saw it. The EIV was clearly marked N for no. So I was able to verify that. At the same time, I also ran Mr. Reed and looked at his driving record, and he was valid at the time.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. Any other questions by the board?
I have one more.
Yes, Ms. Robertson.
So it was
Yes.
found that his license wasn't suspended. What was the communication with Mr. Reed after that was determined?
He didn't know that at the time. So when we played the video, you heard him go back to the car. The computer says suspended. He's flipping through the pages. Calls are going out that require resources. Cruisers are passing him. His partner says, "Can we hurry this up?" And he says to Officer Morgan, he's clear, meaning he's not wanted. He's suspended, revoked. So at that moment, what it's saying, and as part of the investigation, is did he intentionally tell Mr. Reed that he was suspended to harass or berate or belittle? Did he do it for a malicious purpose? What the investigation shows, and I believe I've concluded, is that he was distracted, thinking about all the things that needed to get done. He had an indication. He looked at a file, scrolling through several pages of information, tells Officer Morgan, his partner, he's suspended, revoked. Because in that moment, based on what he saw, he believed that to be true. He ended up being wrong, and he is wrong for that. But it was an accident, an honest mistake. And it wasn't something where he said, you know what, I'm going to show this guy. I'm going to plant the seed that he's done something wrong. Truth be told, if he really wanted to do something like that, then write him a ticket for insurance, for suspended, and throw some other things on there. That's not what he did. And it doesn't appear that that was his intention. His intention was, man, I got to get going. And while he's talking to him about that very issue, everything is kind of going off the rails. So I didn't believe, and I asked for an exoneration because our policy would require that he be lying as a malicious act. If it was an honest mistake, he didn't tell him not to drive. He didn't write him a ticket. He didn't say get out and walk. He just said, well, maybe you can check on that and let it go with that. And Mr. Reed was able to do that.
So I understand that in the moment he wasn't aware of that, but it was determined after the fact that was the case. So I guess I'm asking more about that correspondence with Mr. Reed. You know, while I would say that it's obviously minute, right? Clearly that was a mistake, and I think that should have been communicated to some degree.
Yes, I agree with you, and it was. So I was able to talk with Mr. Reed both by telephone during our initial contact, and then later when I conducted an interview with him. And I can't remember at which point, but I believe we probably talked on both of those issues because those were the natures of the complaint.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, good question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Robson. Captain Diaz, could you just summarize the communication with Mr. Reed, informing him of the disposition of his complaint? How was that explained to him? Through a letter, through a telephone call? Hello?
Yes, so once the report that I generate is sent through the chain of command to the chief will review it, determine whether he's going to accept that or not. Once it's accepted, then letters are sent out to Mr. Reed.
Yeah, my question is, how, do you deal with any of the complexities of this situation and explaining it to Mr. Reed, or does the letter simply state the complaint is not withheld, is not upheld? Was it a brief explanation, or do you go into any kind of detail in communicating with the citizen about the situation that occurred?
The writing, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I know I can't ask my partner to help me out with that one. But I apologize, I don't have that writing in front of me.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions before we move into closed session? Mr. Gardner, thank you for being here this evening. And as we move into closed session, as we indicated early, you will not be able to participate in that. And Captain Diaz and Mr. Reed, thank you so much for participating with us this evening.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
So do we exit this room and go to the other? Is that how that works?
I'm not sure.
Yes, please. Yes, I just resent the deliberation link to everyone.
Okay.
To make
Thank
it more,
you.
to make it easier. But everybody should leave this meeting, please.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
You emailed that, I assume.
Yes, I did just a moment ago.
Okay.
Chair Payne.
Hi, sweetheart. Okay.